How to empower your team without losing control. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Melissa. I'm an executive coach and a management consultant. And what I do day to day is I work with leaders. I work with executives, I work with managers, managers at all levels, and I help them increase their influence, enhance their communication so that they can communicate confidently, assertively, effectively, and I help them build high-performing self-managed teams. And that means they get to get their time back and bring things into balance. So if you have been following us, you know that we have a very special masterclass coming up in a couple of weeks. I want to say 2 weeks.
Yeah.
On April 22nd is the Boundaries and Balance Masterclass. So if you're curious and you want to explore a little bit more about your boundaries and how to bring in more balance as a leader in your role, so that this is beyond work-life balance, there's a whole lot more about boundaries and balance. You can claim your seat by going to inchargecoaching.ca/masterclass. Is that possible for you, Kay, to drop that
Yeah.
in? Well, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop that in the comments, and I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself, Kay.
Okay. All right. Hey, everyone. I'm so excited to be here as always. I'm Kay. I'm the client solutions specialist at In Charge Coaching, which basically means I get to help leaders implement all the goodness that Melissa teaches by equipping them with resources, with tools, to lead with clarity and confidence. I also lead the charge when it comes to organizing learning events like this live, the masterclass, the workshops, and I've seen firsthand how much these conversations matter. And I'm here today to give you an employee perspective because I've lived through both extremes, being micromanaged and being left completely to figure things out on my own. And neither one feels great. So, so yeah, I'm excited. I'm very excited for this topic. Let's dive in.
Awesome. And I love that you bring that employee perspective. And I think today we'll be able to share a little bit about how we operate. So I'd love for you to give examples
Yeah,
of that. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I have no idea what you're
I'm
going to
ready.
share
I'm ready.
behind the scenes right now. So here's a topic that I work with behind the scenes, and I work with teams. So I don't just work with the leaders, but oftentimes I get to work with people at different levels, up to the front line. So I get to talk to everyone and hear about what is going on for them, their needs, what's lacking for them to really get to that high performance. And so what we know now and what most leaders know is that empowering is important, right? That is the first struggle, is to start to empower your team, which means empowering means sharing power, right? Giving autonomy, and that means letting go of control for the leader,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
letting go of control when you're the one responsible at the end of the day for the outputs of your team and your team's productivity and performance, that's a very scary thing to do,
I
isn't
can
it?
imagine. Yeah.
It's very scary. So, for you, Kay, you're completely in control of what is your responsibility. So imagine, you have someone. I say, hey, we're hiring this new person. You're going to train them. You're going to give your responsibilities to them to do, and you're going to oversee those responsibilities. And if they do not perform, I'm going to go knock on your door.
Mm. Yeah.
What
Fun.
happens inside as you think about that?
Definitely not fun. I feel like micromanaged and like lack of ownership and sort of like not the trust is not there.
Yeah. There's
To allow,
the, can you trust them to do the work?
yeah, yeah, that's true.
And how do I make sure that the work is getting done?
Mm-hmm.
And ooh, if something goes wrong or they don't do it right, now I'm going to have to go and be the cleanup,
Yeah.
the cleanup of that mess and get things back in order. So now that's going to take me more time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
do they have the right training? Do they really understand what they're doing? There's all of these things that come up as we give up control and empower another person to run with something, to give them that autonomy. And yet, we know that autonomy is one of the keys to unlocking intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Yeah.
Right? So it is really important to be able to share that power, empower others, give them the autonomy, that need for freedom and that need for power that they have. We feed it by empowering them and giving them autonomy so they can be motivated to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is, if we can get to that place of really, taking that risk and giving it away, and then they don't produce, they don't perform, they
Yeah.
don't remit things on time, the quality of the work suffers. Right? We want to take it back. I trusted you, I trust you no more, let me take it back.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why giving autonomy doesn't always work. And so going back to, I talk to a lot of people and I listen. I don't talk to, I talk with. And essentially the talking part on my part is asking questions. And I do a whole lot of listening. So most of
Yeah.
my conversations are about 80% listening.
Yeah.
And I'm listening for what is actually going on. Why is the quality suffering? What is happening? You have all of this autonomy, the autonomy that people are asking for, right? We're living in a day and age where people are demanding autonomy. So you have this autonomy, what's happening? And what they tell me is that I don't have enough direction.
Mm.
I'm lacking the support, I'm lacking the leadership, I'm lacking the direction.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really important as we empower people and give them autonomy is that we don't leave the room. We're not handing over the key. We're not giving them full and we just leave and trust, right? We don't put any blinders on. We need to still be present. We need to still be checking in. We need to still be supporting without, taking that control back. How do we support without taking that control back? So you can see how there's a need to teeter-totter between directing, not directing too much because that becomes micromanaging. So, right, the right amount of directing and the right amount of empowering.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have here is we need to bring these things into balance. And as much as I would like to give you the right formula for that balance, it is so unique to every single individual that you work with. Every person that's directly reporting to you will need a different mix of it. And for you as an individual, as a leader, you're gonna have some things that you're okay with and not okay with, some things that you're comfortable with and not comfortable with. And so what that's going to look like for you is also unique. So that recipe is going to be very, very different for every single leader and then every single interaction that they're having with their team members. So I want to bring in the awareness of this is something that's in tension that will need balancing. And how do we bring things into balance? Okay.
Okay, so I think a very recent incident stands out to me We were preparing for the masterclass launch, and there were a lot of moving pieces, as always. And I remember, like, instead of micromanaging it, you gave me the full ownership of certain tasks, but you were also clear about your expectations. You said, like, hey, here's the outcome I'm looking for, here are my expectations, and I know that you will step in if there's a risk to the timeline or the alignment. But otherwise, you were like, this is yours, and you stuck to it, and you weren't hovering or standing on top of me, but I knew if I needed support, you would show up, and you do show up. So that's a mix of trust and accountability that I love, and it made me want to show up fully. It has always made me want to show up fully because I felt seen, not just supervised. I felt supported, and not just like being watched or walking on eggshells. So that was something that was very empowering to me, and that's more on the empowering side than the directing side, I feel.
And yet there was enough direction for you
Yeah,
to
yeah,
move
there
forward
was.
with clarity. And so
Absolutely.
that was that perfect mix. And what allows me to do that, what allows me to bring things into balance is boundaries.
Mhm.
So, one word solution, boundaries is the answer.
Yeah.
And when I think of boundaries in an instance like that, I think of what's mine. So, as the leader, what is yours to own in this
Mhm.
situation, in this project, in this, whatever the context is? What is yours to own? And what was mine to own in that example was clarity. What is the outcome we're looking for? How do we know if we're on track, right? We had really clear benchmarks and KPIs, um,
Absolutely.
clarity as to what kind of expectations I had, especially in terms of communication.
Right.
And then what was yours? What's theirs? What's the employees? That clarity, being able to say, hey, this thing right here, this is exactly what you're responsible for, and being able to give it to them and communicate, hey, this right here is what you're responsible for, means they
Mhm.
know their responsibility and they can feel clear to run with it. What decisions can you make? We talk a lot about that on our
Yeah.
team. you know Here's what you're going to be responsible for, here's the direction we're going in, here's the decisions you can make, here's the decisions I'm not so comfortable with that I would rather have an input in, or I
Yeah.
would rather make the decision myself. Right? Input and permission, not the same thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so we talk about this. We also talk about where the edges are. We talk about where is the handoff. Where's the edge of my role? Where's the edge of your role? What overlaps and where's the handoffs?
Mhm.
And, as I'm talking about these things, what's mine to own, what's yours to own, where are the edges, these are things that we talk about. This is the stuff we talk about in our team meetings.
Yeah. We
These are
do.
the check in moments. This is what we're talking about. And it has become, how do you feel about these conversations? With
I feel like they set a very clear expectation with respect to where I'm allowed to step in and what's mine to own. And that gives me a lot of clarity how to move and how to perform my tasks, whatever I'm given, and
Mhm.
what something someone else is responsible for that I can collaborate with if needed. So that kind of clarity is something that I value a lot because it's sometimes is missing from a lot of teams. Sort of clarity is not there, and we do discuss a lot about it within ourselves and within our team. So I find it's very empowering. Like each person has their own kingdom, as you call it, and that is very powerful. Like you feel like you are the king of this kingdom, yet you have like certain other kingdoms that you do collaborate with as and when required, and that's very like strengthening and empowering.
Hmm. And it weird for you to have these types of conversations kind of all of the time?
It was new for me. It was not weird for me. It was very new because I, in the previous teams that I worked, in the previous companies that I worked, it was not normal to have these conversations. Like you were just expected to, decide who is going to take up this task or who is not going to take up this task and who is going to do what. And everybody was sort of, if it was not done, then the onus was always on the manager. And um, yeah, because they didn't clarify who will run with it and who will do what, so everybody is just like running confused and just taking up whatever.
And
So
that
yeah,
right there, the confusion, let's
yeah,
just like highlight that. The confusion is what is creating a lot of the stress and chaos.
yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. I
Yeah.
agree there.
So normalizing this communicating
Mm-hmm.
boundaries and needs is what creates that clarity and allows people to perform. And so I'm communicating my boundaries. I'm also communicating my needs.
Yeah.
And then I'm checking in and I'm asking about other people's boundaries, my employees' boundaries and their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a big part of the conversations that we have, our team meetings. It's less about the task at hand or what we're going to do, and it's more about how we're going to do it,
Yeah.
how we're going to work together, that process of working together. Those are the things that form the biggest part of our team meetings. And we'll discuss a little bit about the what, but the main, and that's not what we typically do in team meetings.
Yeah, you're right.
We talk about this thing on my desk and we try
Yeah.
to problem solve, but we're not talking about how we work together.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to make that difference in a team's performance. Starting to really talk about how we work together. That's going to bring it to the next level. And that is also going to be that bridge for you to start empowering others with autonomy and responsibility, and them feeling comfortable to actually take that responsibility and deliver on it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want your time back, if you want to be able to focus on what's on your desk and not worry about what's on other people's desk, you need to have these conversations.
Yeah.
So today I want to leave you with 4 questions to reflect on. 4 things that are really going to make a difference for you to start having these conversations. So first off, how are you willing to show up in your role as a leader? What are you comfortable with and what's not comfortable? Some of these places you're going to have to grow a little bit in your comfort, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the internal work that we do.
It's
But
true.
if you were to, draw a map of your role as a leader and how you show up, how are you willing to show up? And then what are you willing to let go of? There are some things that you're holding on to that are creating suffering. That's
Yeah.
that's creating that imbalance.
Yeah.
So what are you willing to let go of and start empowering others with? Mm-hmm. You're thinking
Beautiful
about
question.
it, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then revisit, what are the actual bounds of your role? Where does your role stop and where does your employee's role begin? What's that handoff? What's that transition look like? And most people and most employees can't express that, and that's a problem. When I'm talking to an employee and I'm asking them about this piece, this transition, this handoff, and when it stops being their responsibility and goes back to somebody else, they don't know. They can't answer this, and that is a problem. This is where a lot of issues arise from. So what are the actual bounds of your role and their role? And then when is it time to step in? There are times when you need to step in. There are times when you're going to have to say, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of autonomy back. And there are times when this is reasonable to do and it is needed.
It is.
And then when are times that it is time to let go, and even though you feel the urge to step in, it's really important that you let it go and let them grow and let them learn the lessons so that they can develop the skills.
Yeah.
This is failing forward. This is about, not a mistake, but actually a learning, a lesson that allows people to grow into who they're meant to become. Mm-hmm. And they're stepping into their full potential. And we learn best by our failures, by our mistakes. There's nothing that can replace that pain.
Yeah.
The growth that comes from that.
I agree.
Right?
I agree with that.
But we're so afraid of and wanting to have things perfect and afraid of those failures and mistakes that we step in to save, but then the person doesn't actually learn. So that means we get to step in and save continuously, and that takes time and attention. And now we're back into being too involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so where is your comfort in failure and learning? And where are you willing to stretch yourself a little bit? And when is it an actual emergency that you need to step in?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what would stepping in look like? How would stepping in be respectful to the employee so that they don't feel crushed? We don't want to affect their motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And so stepping in for me, right? I know when to step in because I'm getting the regular updates, and we've set up a flow of communication from Kay to me, from Gisna to me, so that communication is always flowing between us and amongst us. And so I will have an indication, and I know what my boundaries are in terms of when to step in, and I will ask permission to step in. So that's another boundary, is I won't step in without permission.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I'm stepping in, we're going to work together. I don't relieve Kay of her responsibility when I'm stepping in.
Yeah.
We get to roll up our sleeves and do it together.
I'm for that.
So those are my boundaries, just examples of my boundaries about stepping in and versus when it is time to let go and let grow. And there's a lot of decision making that I empower Kay with, where mistakes are made, and I might even give feedback and say, don't change anything, right?
Yeah, you do.
I've noticed this. Here would be my preference, so that moving forward she knows. And sometimes, we need to undo what's just been done.
Yeah, I remember those times.
Exactly. And you can see how we can just kind of laugh about it. And this is part of us growing, and this is how we are getting stronger as a team.
Absolutely.
And this is why I can trust my team and they can trust me. All right, so boundaries and balance. I have a whole masterclass just to cover this topic. It is such an important topic. And my clients always say that, every time they revisit these topics, they always learn something new, because it is a lot more than just personal boundaries or work-life boundaries where you leave work at 5 or don't check your email after a certain time, or these are beautiful things. And what creates a lot of our stress is what happens between the 9 and 5. It's what happens in the workday. It's how we stay balanced when in those critical moments when we are called to be our best. How we stay responsive. And that's what we're going to cover in the masterclass. So on April 22nd, you can join us 2 hours. That's an investment in yourself so that you can start feeling more balanced and getting your time back, getting your focus back, and feeling the way that you want to feel in your role, feeling confident, feeling assertive. We are going to start with exploring what are boundaries and what are your boundaries. So I'm going to lead you through an exercise so you can get that clarity. That is the first piece that most people, we know we need boundaries, but what is that unique boundary to you that's going to make a difference in your role, in your situation, in your context? All right. Yeah. So clarity on boundaries. Then we're going to talk about communicating those boundaries assertively, gaining that confidence. And then we're going to talk about how to maintain and get
very important
boundaries.
Very important.
Right? All right. So it's a date. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Claim your seat. It's completely free, by the way.
Yeah.
We covered that. We are going to provide you with a workbook. So if you show up in person, live, not in person, live, virtually in person, then you will get access to your workbook, and that's going to be your blueprint. So you can walk away and you can rinse and repeat what we've done inside the workshop. And put it all into action. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. Leave me your insights. I'd love to know what's one insight that you're taking away from today that's going to allow you to proceed into the rest of your day and into tomorrow with more balance and more energy. There you are. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.